They called him the King of New York, a man who ended lives with a snap of his fingers. But that night at Vetroscuro, Alessandro Murti didn't want blood. He wanted entertainment. He looked at the trembling waitress who had just spilled wine on his $3,000 suit and let out a cold, terrifying laugh. The room froze. He pointed to the stage where the opera diva was supposed to be. "You ruined my night," he whispered, his voice smooth as velvet, but sharp as a razor. "So fix it. If you can sing the Queen of the Night aria, right now I'll marry you. If you fail, you disappear." He smirked. He thought he had won. Clear his throat. He didn't know who she really was. The rain in Manhattan was relentless that November night, hammering against the tinted windows of Vetroscuro, the most exclusive supper club in the Tribeca district. To the public, it was a Michelin-starred sanctuary for the elite. To those who knew the truth, it was the neutral ground for the East Coast's most dangerous crime families. Camilla Russo adjusted the collar of her stiff black uniform, her fingers trembling slightly. She'd been working here for 6 months, and the terror never quite faded. She was 24 with tired eyes and hands that were rough from scrubbing floors during her day shift at a diner in Queens. Here she was, a ghost, an invisible servant meant to pour wine, clear plates, and never ever make eye contact. "Table 4 needs a refill on the bow now, Russo." The floor manager, a sweaty man named Mr. Henderson, hissed into her ear. "And for God's sake, don't look at them. The Moretti brothers are in a mood." Camilla's stomach turned to ice. The Moretti table. Everyone knew Alejandro Moretti. He wasn't just a mob boss. He was a titan of industry, a man whose legitimate shipping empire was just as vast as his underground network. He was 32, devastatingly handsome, with sharp features and eyes the color of cold steel, and rumor had it he hadn't smiled genuinely since his father was assassinated 5 years ago. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. The club had hired a famous soprano from Italy, Giulia Venezzi, to perform for Alejandro's private dinner. But 10 minutes ago, news had broken in the kitchen. Venezzi was stuck at JFK Airport due to the storm. The atmosphere in the dining room was suffocating. Camilla walked toward table 4, balancing the heavy crystal decanter. The table was surrounded by men in dark suits, but Alejandro sat at the head, looking like a bored king on a throne. He was twirling a silver lighter between his fingers, staring blankly at the empty stage. "Where is she?" Alejandro asked, his voice low. He didn't shout, which made it scarier. "Traffic boss." One of his carpos, a bulky man named Rocco, muttered. "The storm." Alejandro stopped twirling the lighter. "I don't care about the storm. I paid for music. I paid for perfection." Camilla reached the table. She knew the drill pour from the right disappeared to the left, but as she leaned in to fill Alejandro's glass, Rocco slammed his fist on the table in frustration at the news. Damn it. The sudden vibration shook the table. Camilla gasped as the heavy decanter slipped from her sweat-slicked grip. Time seemed to slow down. The crystal bottle hit the edge of the table, shattering. A wave of dark red wine exploded outward, drenching the pristine white tablecloth and splashing directly onto the lap of Alejandro Moretti's bespoke charcoal suit. The entire restaurant went silent. The clinking of silverware stopped. The piano player in the corner froze. Camilla stood paralyzed, her face draining of all color. She had just assaulted the most dangerous man in New York with a bottle of wine. Alejandro didn't move. He didn't jump up. He simply looked down at the red stain spreading across his lap, then slowly lifted his eyes to meet hers. His gaze was terrifyingly calm. Camilla's voice was a dry croak. "I am so sorry, sir. I'll get a towel." "Stop," Alessandro said. She froze. He stood up slowly, towering over her. He reached out and picked up a shard of the broken crystal from the table. He inspected it in the light, then tossed it aside. "You know," he said, addressing the room, but keeping his eyes on her. "I've had a very disappointing night. My singer is missing. My business deal is stalled, and now a clumsy waitress has ruined a suit that costs more than her life's earnings." Camilla felt tears prick her eyes, but she bit her lip until it bled. She wouldn't cry. "Not here. What is your name?" "Clear his throat," he asked. "Camilla," she whispered. "Camilla?" He tasted the name, mocking it. Well, Camila, my men would usually take you out back and teach you a lesson about respect, but I'm bored. I'm incredibly bored. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne, tobacco, and rain. Clear his throat. Let's play a game, Alessandro said, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. He gestured to the empty stage where the microphone stood, waiting for the missing soprano. You ruined the music, so you replace it. Camila blinked, confused.
Sir, sing. Alejandro.
Oh, commanded. Get on that stage. If you can entertain me, if you can sing an aria that doesn't make my ears bleed, you walk out of here with your life. Heck, if you're actually good. He laughed a dark, humorless sound. I'll make you the Queen of New York. I'll marry you right here tonight. The men at the table chuckled nervously. It was a joke, a cruel, impossible joke. A waitress couldn't sing opera. He was setting her up to be humiliated before he punished her. And if I can't, Camila asked, her voice trembling. Alessandro's smile vanished. Then you work off the debt of this suit in my private club for the next 10 years. A collective gasp rippled through the room. That was a sentence to slavery. Camila looked at the stage. Then she looked at Alessandro. He saw fear in her eyes. Yes. But deep down, buried under the exhaustion and the cheap uniform, he saw something else. A spark of defiance. She nodded once. Deal. Alejandro sat back down, signaling for a fresh glass. He expected her to run or to get on stage and belt out some terrible pop song, at which point he would have security drag her out. He was cruel. He knew it. The world had made him cruel. Since his father died, he found amusement only in pushing people to their breaking points. Camila walked to the stage. Her legs felt like lead. She stepped up onto the platform, the spotlight blinding her momentarily. She looked out at the sea of judging faces. Mafia dons, corrupt politicians, high society wives. They were all waiting for her to fail. She walked to the pianist, an old man named Yeppe, who had played for the greatest voices in Europe. Do you know Mozart? She whispered to him. Yeppe looked at her cheap uniform and scoffed. Girl, get down before you get a hurt. Please, she said, her voice turning steel hard. The magic flute de Hel Ra. Yeppe's eyebrows shot up. The Queen of the Night's Aria. It was one of the most difficult pieces of vocal music ever written, requiring a colora soprano with a range that defied logic. It was suicide for an amateur. If you insist, the old man muttered, shaking his head. Camila stepped to the microphone. She closed her eyes. Don't think about the gangsters, she told herself. Think about Mom. Think about the Juilliard rejection letter because you couldn't afford the tuition. Think about the years of practice in the basement while Dad drank himself to death. She wasn't just a waitress. She was Camila Russo, the daughter of the disgraced tenor Luciano Russo, a man whose voice had once charmed Milan before gambling destroyed him. Clear as throat, she had learned to sing before she learned to speak. The piano began the rapid, angry intro. Alejandro swirled his wine, not looking at the stage. He was already signaling Rocco to prepare the car. This was a waste of time. Then she opened her mouth. The first note didn't just ring out, it exploded. It was a strike of lightning, clear, resonant, and ferociously powerful. Alessandro's hand froze midair. Camila wasn't singing with fear. She was singing with rage. The aria was the Queen of the Night, commanding her daughter to kill a rival. It was a song of vengeance, of power, of hellish fury, and Camila poured every ounce of her suffering into it. De Hel Raka coughed in Manamson. Hell's vengeance boils in my heart. Her voice soared, hitting the high F6s with terrifying precision. The staccato notes, the most impossible run of high pitches were executed not just perfectly, but with a menacing speed that made the hair on the back of Alejandro's neck stand up. The room didn't just go silent. It ceased to breathe. The fork dropped from Rocco's hand, clattering onto his plate. Alejandro slowly turned his head toward the stage. The trembling girl was gone. In her place was a Valkyrie in a waitress uniform. Her eyes were squeezed shut. her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her chest heaving as she navigated the treacherous vocal acrobatics. She wasn't looking for approval. She was declaring war on the world that had underestimated her. As she hit the final high-resolving note, she held it. She held it longer than seemed humanly possible, the sound filling every corner of the club, vibrating the crystals and the chandeliers. When she finally cut the note off, the silence that followed was heavy, almost painful. Camila opened her eyes, breathing hard, sweat trickling down her temple. She looked straight at Alejandro. For 10 seconds no one moved. Then Alejandro Martí stood up. He didn't smirk. He didn't laugh. He looked stunned. It was the first time in 5 years anyone had seen him look genuinely surprised. He began to clap slowly at first. Clap, clap, clap. Then the rest of the room followed the applause, swelling into a roar. Men were standing up. The old pianist Giuseppe was looking at her with tears in his eyes. Camila stood frozen, the adrenaline crashing. Clear as throat, she had done it. Alejandro walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. He stopped at the edge of the platform and looked up at her. The arrogance was gone from his eyes, replaced by an intense, predatory curiosity. "You didn't tell me," Alejandro said, his voice carrying over the dying applause. "Tell you what?" Camila asked, her voice shaking again now that the music was over. "That you are a weapon," he said softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. A heavy family signate ring, not a wedding band, but something far more significant in his world. It was the ring of his protection. He placed it on the stage floor right in front of her shoes. "I am a man of my word, Camila," he announced, turning to face his stunned associates. "I said if she could sing, I'd marry her." "Boss, surely you're joking," Rocco stammered from the table. "She's a waitress?" Alejandro's eyes darkened. "She is no waitress. Not anymore." He turned back to Camila and extended his hand. "Come down, Tesoro. The night is young and we have a wedding to plan." Camila stared at his hand. She knew she should run. This man was dangerous. Marrying him was insane. But looking at the ring and then at the manager, Mr. Henderson, who was cowering in the corner, she realized something. If she took his hand, she would never have to scrub a floor again. If she took his hand, she entered the fire. She looked at Alejandro Moretti, the Wolf of New York. "I don't want to marry you," she said, her voice clear. The room gasped again. "You didn't say no to Alessandro Martí." Alejandro raised an eyebrow, a challenge lighting up his gaze. "Oh, you prefer the debt?" "No," Camila said, stepping down from the stage, ignoring his hand and standing toe-to-toe with him. "You made a bet? I won. I don't want marriage, I want a favor." Alessandro leaned in his lips, brushing her ear. "Careful, little bird. You're negotiating with the devil now. What is this favor?" "My father," she whispered. "Luciano Russo. He didn't die of alcohol. He was murdered by someone in this room." Alejandro pulled back, his eyes narrowing. The playful atmosphere evaporated instantly. The air grew cold. "Luciano Russo was your father?" Alejandro asked, his voice devoid of emotion. "Yes," Camila replied. "And I want the name of the man who killed him." "Clear's throat." Alejandro stared at her for a long moment. Then a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It wasn't the cruel smirk from before. It was the smile of a predator who had finally found a partner worthy of the hunt. "Marriage it is," Alejandro declared, grabbing her hand and pulling her into his side, facing the room of gangsters. "Because the man who killed your father is the man trying to kill me." The rain had turned into a torrential downpour as the heavy oak doors of Vetroscuro swung open. Alessandro Moretti didn't just walk. He cut through the atmosphere like a shark moving through deep water. His hand was firmly planted on the small of Camila's back, a gesture that looked possessive to the onlookers. But to Camila, it felt like a steel clamp, ensuring she didn't bolt. A sleek black armored Bentley Mulsanne idled at the curb. Rocco, the bulky Carpo, who had dropped his fork earlier, held the door open, his eyes scanning the street with the intensity of a Secret Service agent. "Get in," Alejandro ordered, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Camila hesitated. The cold New York wind whipped her wet hair against her face. I can't just leave my shift. My manager, Mr. Henderson, has already been compensated for your immediate resignation. Alejandro saw ID, practically shoving her into the plush leatherback seat. And considering he was about to fire you for spilling wine on a $3,000 buy-on suit, I'd say I did you a favor. The door slammed shut, sealing them inside the silent leather-scented capsule. The outside world, the sirens, the rain, the normal life she had clung to was instantly muted. As the car pulled away, merging into the chaotic traffic of West Broadway, Camila pressed herself against the door, putting as much distance between her and the crime lord as possible. "Where are you taking me?" she demanded, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. The adrenaline from the area was fading, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. Alejandro poured himself a drink from the car's crystal decanter. He didn't offer her one. "To a place where Victor Sterling can't put a bullet in your head before morning." Clear as throat, Camila's breath hitched. "Sterling? The real estate mogul? The drug mogul?" Alejandro corrected, sipping his scotch. "And the man who controlled your father's gambling debts. He's the one who ordered the hit on Luciano Russo." Camila felt the blood drain from her face. Victor Sterling was a fixture in the tabloids, a philanthropist, a billionaire, a man who shook hands with the mayor. The idea that he was a murderer was impossible. Yet looking at Alessandro's stony face, she knew it was the truth. "Why?" she whispered. "My father was just a singer, a gambler, yes, but he wasn't a criminal." Alejandro turned to her, his gray eyes catching the passing streetlights. "That's where you're wrong, Toro. Luciano wasn't just a singer. He was a mule. He used his touring schedule to move sensitive information across border. S for the families. When he tried to get out, Sterling had him silenced. They made it look like alcohol poisoning, but we know better." Camila stared at her hands, Waitress hands red and chapped. Her entire life she had believed her father was weak, a drunk who abandoned her to addiction. Now this stranger was rewriting her history in the back of a Bentley. "And you?" Camila asked, her eyes narrowing. "Are you the hero in this story?" Alejandro let out a dry, sharp laugh. "There are no heroes in New York, Camila. Only survivors. I didn't kill your father, but I didn't save him either. However, Sterling is making a move on my territory. He thinks the Moretti family is weak because I focus on legal shipping. He's Clear's throat wrong." He leaned forward, closing the distance between them. The air in the car suddenly felt thin. Clear's throat. "Sterling was at the club tonight," Alejandro revealed. "He was in the back booth. He saw you sing. He saw the resemblance. By now he knows Luciano Russo had a daughter, and he knows that daughter is a loose end." "So I'm bait," Camila realized, a wave of nausea hitting her. "You want to marry me to draw him out?" "No," Alessandro said, his voice dropping to a growly whisper. "I want to marry you because a wife is untouchable. Under the old laws, the laws men like Sterling still fear, you cannot touch a Dawn's wife without declaring total war. If you are just a waitress, you disappear tomorrow. If you are Mrs. Moretti, you are a queen on a chessboard." The car slowed down, turning into the underground garage of a massive glass skyscraper overlooking Central Park, the Moretti Tower. "You have a choice," Alejandro said as the car came to a halt. "You can open that door, walk out, and take your chances with Sterling's hitmen, or you can come upstairs, sign a piece of paper, and help me destroy the man who took your father from you." Camila looked out the window. The concrete walls of the garage felt like a prison, but out there in the rain, she was prey. She looked back at Alessandra. "If I do this, if I play your wife, I have conditions." Alejandro raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "I'm listening. I'm not a prop," she said fiercely. "I want access to the files. I want to know everything my father did. And when Sterling is dead, I want a ticket to Milan and enough money to study at the conservatory. I want my life back." Alejandro stared at her. He had expected tears, begging, or greed. He hadn't expected a business negotiation. He extended his hand. "Deal." She didn't shake it. "One more thing. We don't share a bed. This is a business arrangement. Nothing more." Alessandro smirked, a dangerous glint returning to his eyes. "Don't flatter yourself, Camila. I don't sleep with employees, and until that ring is on your finger, you're just hired help." He opened the door and stepped out. Camila took a deep breath, smoothed her apron, and followed him into the elevator that would take her to the penthouse and to a life she never asked for. The penthouse was a study in cold luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline, but the furniture was sparse, modern, and uninviting. It was the home of a man who didn't plan on staying long, or who didn't know how to live. "Rocco will show you to the guest wing," Alejandro said, loosening his tie as he walked toward a mahogany desk. "Clothes will be delivered in the morning. We announce the engagement tomorrow night at the Met Gala." "Tomorrow?" Camila gasped. "That's too soon. I don't have anything to wear. I don't know how to act in that world." "You acted just fine on stage," Alejandro said without looking back. "You're an actress, Camila. You played the role of a waitress for years. Now play the role of a woman in love. Your life depends on it." As Camila followed Rocco down the long, silent hallway, she realized the truth. She hadn't just agreed to a marriage. She had agreed to a performance. And this time there were no rehearsals. The preparation for the Metropolitan Museum of Art's annual gala was less like a makeover and more like a military operation. At 6:00 a.m., a team of 3 stylists arrived at the penthouse. They didn't speak English. They spoke in rapid-fire French, measuring Camila's waist, critiquing her skin, and pulling at her hair. There were no mirrors in the dressing room they set up. Alejandro had ordered them removed. "You will see the final product when I do," he had said over his morning espresso, reading the Wall Street Journal, as if he hadn't just kidnapped a waitress. By 7:00 p.m., Camila felt like a doll that had been painted and varnished. When she finally walked out into the main living area, the room went quiet. Even Rocco, who was polishing a handgun by the wet bar, stopped what he was doing. She was wearing a gown of deep blood red velvet. It was strapless, hugging her curves with scandalous precision before cascading into a dramatic train. Around her neck sat a diamond necklace that looked heavy enough to sink a ship, the Moretti family heirloom. Her dark hair was swept up in an intricate shin, exposing the long, elegant line of her neck. She didn't look like Camila from Queens anymore. She looked like dangerous royalty. Alessandra was waiting by the window, dressed in a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He turned around, and for a moment his mask slipped. His eyes widened slightly, traveling from the hem of her dress up to her eyes. Red, he noted, his voice rougher than usual. A bold choice. "You chose it," Camila reminded him. "I chose it because it's the color of war," Alejandro said, regaining his composure. He walked over to her, stepping into her personal space. He reached out and adjusted the diamond necklace, his knuckles brushing against her warm skin. Camila shivered, but she didn't pull away. "Tonight," he whispered, his eyes locking onto hers. "Victor Sterling will be watching every move. If he senses fear, he strikes. If he senses hesitation, he strikes. You must look at me as if I am the only man in the world." "And you," Camila challenged, looking up at him. "Can you look at me as if I'm not just a pawn?" Alessandro's thumb grazed her collarbone. "Tonight, Toro, you are the queen, and I am simply the king protecting his throne." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" The ride to the Met was a blur of flashing lights. When the car stopped, the paparazzi swarmed like locusts. The flashes were blinding. "Head up," Alejandro commanded under his breath as the door opened. "Smile! You won the lottery!" Camila stepped out onto the red carpet. The noise was deafening. "Mr. Moretti, over here. Who is the girl? Is it true about the merger?" Alejandro wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her flush against him. It felt protective, solid. For a second, amidst the chaos, he was the only ancho she had. They moved through the gauntlet, Alejandro guiding her with a subtle, powerful grace. Inside, the great hall of the museum was transformed. Classical music drifted through the air, mixing with the hum of $1 billion worth of conversation. Waiters moved with champagne trays, and the elite of New York mingled near the Temple of Dendor. "Keep your hand on my arm," Alejandro murmured. "Don't accept drinks from anyone but the bar, and don't go to the bathroom alone." "Romantic," Camila quipped, forcing a smile for a passing senator. "Practical," he countered. They circulated the room. Alejandro introduced her simply as Camila, my fiancée. He didn't invent a backstory. The mystery made them more intrigued. She felt the eyes of women boring into her back, assessing her dress, her jewels, trying to figure out where she came from. Then the atmosphere shifted. The air grew colder. A man approached them near the Egyptian exhibit. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his reptilian eyes. He was dressed impeccably, but there was a violence in the way he moved. "Alessandro," the man said, his voice like grinding stones. "I didn't expect to see you. I heard you had a messy night at Roscuro." Alessandro's grip on Camila's waist tightened imperceptibly. "Victor, it's been a while, and actually the night turned out quite beautifully." Alejandro gestured to Camila. "I believe you haven't met my fiancée. Camila, this is Victor Sterling." Clear his throat. Camila felt her heart slam against her ribs. This was him, the man who killed her father. She looked into his cold blue eyes and saw a flicker of recognition. Fiancé. Victor raised an eyebrow, taking Camila's hand to kiss it. His lips were dry and cold, charmed. "You look remarkably familiar, my dear. Have we met?" "I don't think so," Camila said, pulling her hand back a fraction too quickly. "I'm new to the city." "New to the city," Victor mused, his gaze dropping to the necklace. "But with a voice that carries, I hear. Rumor has it a mystery soprano brought the house down in Tribeca last night." He leaned in closer. "You have the look of the Russos, the eyes." Camila froze. "Victor?" Alejandro interjected, his voice sharp as a blade. "The music is starting, if you'll excuse us." "Of course." Victor smiled, stepping back. "But be careful, Alejandro. Pretty things are so frail. It would be a shame if she broke." Alejandro didn't respond. He swept Camila onto the dance floor. The orchestra began a waltz. "He knows," Camila whispered, her legs trembling as Alejandro pulled her into the dance. "He knows who I am." "He suspects," Alessandro corrected, spinning her around so her back was to Victor. "But he can't touch you here. Not in front of 500 witnesses." "He threatened me," she hissed. "He threatened us," Alejandro said. He looked down at her. "Listen to me, Camila. Sterling is trying to rattle you. Don't let him. Look at me." She looked up. His face was intense, focused solely on her. For a moment the room faded away. They moved in perfect synchronization. He was a surprisingly good dancer. Strong, laid, fluid movements. "My father," Camila said softly. "Did he owe Sterling money?" "Millions." Clear his throat. Alessandro answered honestly, spinning her again. "But Sterling didn't kill him for the money. He killed him because Luciano found out about a shipment of human cargo. Girls. Sterling, Sent just drugs, Camila. He's a trafficker." Camila missed a step. Alejandro caught her instantly, holding her up so she didn't fall. "My father tried to stop it," she asked, hope blooming in her chest. "He tried to go to the police," Alejandro said. "That's why he died." Tears welled in her eyes. Her father wasn't a villain, he was a martyr. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you needed to hate the world to survive tonight." Alejandro said, "Anger is a better shield than grief." The music swelled to a crescendo. Alejandro dipped her low, her red dress fanning out across the floor. It was a picture-perfect moment. The cameras flashed from the balcony as he pulled her back up. Their faces were inches apart. The chemistry was undeniable, fueled by danger and adrenaline. For a second, Camila forgot it was an act. She looked at his lips, wondering. "Boss." A voice crackled in Alejandro's earpiece. It was Rocco. Alejandro stiffened. He stopped dancing abruptly. "What is it?" Camila asked, sensing the change. "We have to go," Alejandro said, his voice ice cold. "Now why?" "What's happening?" Alejandro grabbed her hand, dragging her toward the exit, ignoring the confused looks of the other guests. Rocco found a device on the car. Alejandro whispered as they pushed through the heavy doors into the cool night air, and the brakes on the backup SUV had been cut. They were on the sidewalk now. The valet was nowhere to be seen. The street was strangely empty of taxis. "Sterling moves fast," Alejandro muttered, reaching inside his tuxedo jacket and unholstering a sleek black pistol. Camila gasped. "Here at the Met." "It's the perfect distraction," Alejandro said, scanning the rooftops. Suddenly, a motorcycle engine roared to life down the block. Then another, and another. 3 bikes riders clad in black sped toward them, weaving through the parked limousines. "Get down!" Alejandro roared. He shoved Camila behind a concrete pillar just as the first gunshot rang out, shattering the glass display case behind them. The opera was over. The war had begun. The chaos outside the Met was absolute. The pop of gunfire was distinct, cutting through the screams of the scattering socialites. Alejandro moved with terrifying efficiency. He didn't panic. He calculated. He shoved Camila behind a thick concrete pillar, shielding her body with his own as bullets chipped away the stone inches from his head. "Stay down," he barked, firing 2 controlled shots into the darkness. One of the motorcycle riders skidded the bike, crashing into a parked limousine in a shower of sparks. "Alejandro!" Camila screamed as she saw a bloom of red expand on the white sleeve of his tuxedo shirt. "It's a graze," he gritted out, reloading with a fluid motion. Rocco now. A heavy black SUV screeched around the corner, mounting the curb and scattering a row of paparazzi. The back door flew open before the car even stopped. Rocco was inside, wielding a submachine gun, providing cover fire. Alejandro grabbed Camila by the waist and practically threw her into the back seat, diving in after her. "Go, go," he roared. The SUV peeled away, tires smoking just as the remaining motorcyclists opened fire on the rear window. The bulletproof glass spiderweb but held inside. The silence was sudden and heavy, broken only by the roar of the engine and Camila's clear throat frantic breathing. She looked at Alejandro. He was leaning back against the leather seat, his face pale sweat beading on his forehead. His left arm was soaked in blood. "You're shot," she whispered, her hands hovering over the wound. "I've had worse," Alejandro muttered, closing his eyes. "Rocco, take us to the safe house in Montauk. The penthouse is compromised." "Boss, you need a doctor," Rocco argued from the front seat, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "No hospitals," Alejandro snapped. "Sterling will have eyes there. Just drive." The drive to Montauk took 2 hours. They left the city behind. Driving into the pitch-black darkness of the Long Island coast, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache in Camila's chest. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was a target. They arrived at a secluded modernist house, perched on a cliff edge, surrounded by pine trees and the sound of crashing waves. It was a fortress disguised as a beach house. Once inside, Rocco secured the perimeter, while Alessandro collapsed onto a leather sofa in the living room. Camila didn't wait for instructions. She ran to the kitchen, found the first aid kit under the sink, where she instinctively knew it would be in a house like this, and grabbed a bottle of vodka from the bar. "This is going to hurt," she said, kneeling beside him and cutting away his ruined tuxedo jacket with a pair of scissors. Alejandro watched her through half-lidded eyes. "You have steady hands. I used to patch up my dad when he came home from card games," she said quietly, pouring vodka over the wound. Alejandro hissed in pain, his jaw clenching, but he didn't pull away. The bullet had torn a furrow through his bicep, messy, but not fatal. As Camila worked stitching the skin with the precision of a seamstress, the dynamic between them shifted. The power imbalance dissolved. Here, with blood on her hands and fear in her heart, she was his equal. "Why didn't you leave me?" Alejandro asked softly, watching her face. In the confusion, "You could have run." Camila tied off the bandage and looked up at him. Her eyes were dark pools of intensity. "Because Sterling killed my father. And if I run, he wins. I don't want to survive, Alessandro. I want to win." Alejandro reached out with his good hand cupping her cheek. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. The air in the room grew thick, charged with the electricity of near death. "You are dangerous, Camila," he murmured. "I think I might be falling for you." He leaned in. It wasn't a demanding kiss or a show for the cameras. It was desperate tasting of vodka and rain. Camila kissed him back, her hands gripping his shirt, anchoring herself to him. For a moment they weren't a Dawn and a Waitress. They were two people clinging to each other at the edge of the world. But the moment was shattered by Rocco bursting into the room. "Boss," Rocco said, breathless, "we have a problem. I intercepted a transmission. Sterling isn't just trying to kill you. He's moving this shipment tonight." Alejandro pulled away from Camila. the softness vanishing from his eyes instantly. The King of New York was back. Where? The port of Newark, Rocco said. But he's clever. He's using a charity gal on a docked cruise liner as a cover. High security, no weapons allowed. We can't shoot our way in. Alejandro stood up, ignoring the pain in his arm. He walked to the window, looking out at the stormy sea. If we can't shoot our way in, we have to be Ted. He turned to Camila. A dark plan formed in his eyes. How well do you know Puccini? He asked. The SS Titan was a floating palace docked at the private pier in Newark. It was supposedly hosting the Oceanic Charity Ball organized by one of Victor Sterling's shell companies. The guest list was impenetrable. Senators, judges, and foreign dignitaries were walking up the gangway. Alejandro and Camila sat in a darkened van a mile away. This is insanity, Rocco muttered from the driver's seat, sending her in alone. I'm not alone, Camila said, adjusting the earpiece hidden in her ear canal. She smoothed the skirt of her silver gown, a dress that shimmered like moonlight. I have the best backup in the city. The plan is simple, Alejandro said, checking the Glock strapped to his ankle. He looked at Camila with an intensity that made her shiver. You are the entertainment. We forge the booking agent's credentials. You go in, you sing, you keep Sterling's eyes on you. While the crowd is mesmerized, I slip into the lower decks. The records are in the server room on Deck C, Camila recited. I need to give you 15 minutes. If anything goes wrong, Alejandro Clear's throat said, gripping her shoulders. If Sterling touches you, you say the code word curtain, and I burn the ship down to get you out. I'll be fine, she lied. Camila exited the van and walked toward the security checkpoint. She held her head high, channeling every ounce of diva energy she could muster. Name? The guard grunted. Giulia Venezzi, she said, using the name of the famous soprano she had replaced nights ago. I'm the surprise performer. The guard checked his list. The hacker Alessandro employed had done his job. Yo. You're late, Miss Venezzi. Mr. Sterling is waiting. Camila was escorted backstage. The ballroom was massive, filled with chandeliers and people who had no idea they were standing on top of a human trafficking operation. She peeked through the curtain. Victor Sterling was front and center, holding a champagne flute, laughing with the police commissioner. The sight of him made her blood boil. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer boomed, a special surprise, the voice of an angel. Please welcome Giulia Venezzi. Camila stepped out. The spotlight hit her. She froze for a millisecond. Then she saw Sterling. He wasn't looking at the stage with polite interest. He was looking with suspicion. Clear's throat, he knew. She couldn't falter. She nodded to the conductor and began. She sang O mio babino caro. It was a sweet, pleading song about a daughter begging her father. She sang it directly to Sterling. Her voice floated through the hall, pure and haunting. The crowd was spellbound. While she sang, she tapped her ear twice. Signal sent. Below deck, Alejandro moved like a shadow. He incapacitated two guards with silent, brutal efficiency, dragging them into a supply closet. He reached the server room. It was locked with a biometric scanner. Damn it, he hissed. He pulled a device from his pocket, a decoder. He attached it to the panel. 10%, 20%. Upstairs, Camila finished the first song. The applause was polite. Sterling stood up. He began walking toward the stage. More, someone shouted. One more song, Camila announced into the microphone, her heart hammering against her ribs. For our host, she started. Visarte. I live for art. I live for love. Sterling reached the edge of the stage. He didn't climb up. He just stood there staring up at her. He pulled a phone from his pocket and typed a message. In the server room, the light Clear's throat turned green. Access granted. Alejandro burst in. Rows of servers hummed. He plugged in the drive. The download began. Files, human cargo manifest, ledger payoffs. It was everything. It was enough to send Sterling to the chair and dismantle his entire empire. Got it, Alejandro whispered into the comms. Wrap it up to Sorrow. But as he turned to leave the door behind him, hissed open. 3 men stood there. They weren't security guards. They were mercenaries. And behind them was a man Alessandro recognized. It was Arthur, his own lawyer. The man who had managed the Moretti estate for 20 years. Arthur, Alessandro asked, betraying shock for the first time. Sorry, Alessandro. Arthur sighed, adjusting his glasses. But Victor pays in cryptocurrency, and the retirement plan is much better. Alejandro went for his gun, but he was too slow. A taser prong hit him in the chest. His world went white, then black. Upstairs, Camila's earpiece crackled with static. Alejandro, she whispered mid-breath. Silence! Alejandro! Sterling smiled at her from the foot of the stage. He raised his glass in a mock toast. Then he drew a finger across his throat. Camila stopped singing. The orchestra faltered. The room went silent. 2 guards stepped out from the wings, grabbing her arms. Ladies and gentlemen, Sterling announced smoothly to the confused crowd. It seems our performer is feeling unwell. Let's give her a hand as she exits. As she was dragged off stage, kicking and screaming, the applause drowned out her cries. Camila hit the cold steel floor of the cargo hold hard. The air knocked from her lungs. The smell of diesel and stale cedar filled her nose. Above her, the industrial hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the metal plates, a reminder that they were moving further away from salvation with every second. Comfortable to Sora, Victor Sterling sneered. She scrambled up, gasping. Sterling stood under the harsh halogen lights, swirling a glass of scotch, looking infuriatingly calm. Behind him, Arthur, Alessandro's trusted lawyer for 20 years, avoided her gaze, tapping away at a tablet console. You traitor, Alejandro growled. Camila spun around. Alejandro was bound to a heavy steel chair in the center of the room. His face was bruised, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead, but his eyes were blazing with a terrifying cold fury. It's just business, Alejandra, Arthur muttered, sweating. Victor offered me a retirement. You offered me hard work. Enough, Sterling interrupted. He walked to a massive red shipping container in the shadows and threw the latch open. Camila stifled a sob. Inside, huddled in the dark, were dozens of terrified young women. This is the cargo, Sterling said coldly. Tonight they go to the highest bidders in Eastern Europe. And you two. He pulled a gold-plated pistol from his jacket. You are just loose ends. He pressed the muzzle of the gun against Alessandro's temple. But I'm a man of culture. Sterling smiled cruelly. I feel cheated. I promised my guests a show. So Camila, sing a requiem for your lover. If you bore me, I pull the trigger. If you stop, I pull the trigger. Alejandro's eyes locked onto hers. Don't give up, they said. Camila's mind raced. She scanned it. Room. Metal walls, echoing acoustics, and there, right next to Arthur, was a stack of industrial concert speakers used for ship announcements. The wireless receiver light was blinking green. She didn't have a weapon, but she had her voice. Okay, she whispered, feigning defeat. I'll sing. Just let me have the microphone. Sterling nodded to Arthur, who handed her the wireless mic. Camila gripped it tight. She walked to the center of the room, positioning herself so the speakers were directly behind the villains. She looked at Alessandro. Be ready. She rolled the volume dial on the microphone pack to the absolute maximum. She didn't sing a melody. She drew a massive breath and unleashed a scream, a high-pitched operatic shriek aimed right at the system's resonant frequency. The feedback loop was instantaneous and devastating. The speakers exploded with a howl of electronic noise that felt like a physical punch. Arthur dropped to his knees, clutching his bleeding ears. The guards staggered back, disoriented by the sonic assault. Even Sterling flinched instinctively, pulling the gun away from Alejandro's head to cover his ears. That split second was all Alejandro needed. He threw his body weight backward, tipping the heavy steel chair and smashing it against the floor. With a roar of adrenaline, he snapped the weakened wooden backrest. He was free. He launched himself at Sterling like a wolf. They crashed into the metal wall. Sterling's gun skittered across the floor. A guard recovered and raised his rifle. No! Camila screamed, hurling the heavy microphone at his head. It struck him square in the forehead, ruining his aim. Clear his throat. The bullet sparked harmlessly of F the ceiling. Alessandro dove for the loose golden pistol. Sterling scrambled for a knife in his boot. Bang! The shot rang out, finalizing the silence. Victor Sterling froze, a look of genuine shock on his face. He slumped forward, a single bullet hole in his chest. The king of the underworld was dead. Alessandro stood up, chest heaving. He walked over to Arthur, who was crawling toward the exit, and kicked him hard in the ribs, flipping him over. "Please," Arthur begged. "I had no choice. We always have a choice." Alejandro spat. "Rocco will deal with you." Alejandro turned to Camila. She was shaking, the adrenaline crashing hard. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into a crushing embrace, burying his face in her hair. "You crazy, brilliant woman," he breathed. "You nearly blew my eardrums out." "Better than your brains," she sobbed, holding him tight. Alejandro looked at the open container where the girls were beginning to emerge into the light. He touched the USB drive in his pocket, the evidence that would clean up the city. "The opera is over to Sorrow," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "Let's go home, Smile." Clear his throat 6 months later. The wedding didn't happen in a church. It happened on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera House. The auditorium was packed with the city's elite, but the front row was reserved for the family, including a tearful Rocco and the young women from the container, now free and safe. Camila walked down the aisle in a gown of white silk that moved like water. She wore no diamonds, only her father's simple silver locket. Alessandro stood at the altar, the bruises long gone, looking at her as if she were the only person in the world. When the priest asked for their vows, the hall went silent. "Do you take this man?" Camila looked at the man who had kidnapped her, protected her, and fought a war for her. She smiled, that familiar spark of defiance in her eyes. "I'll marry him," she declared, her voice projecting clearly to the back row without a microphone. "But he still owes me a new uniform." The crowd erupted in laughter. Alejandro threw his head back and laughed a sound of pure joy. He kissed his bride, and the orchestra didn't play a traditional march. At Camila's request, they swelled into the victorious finale of the magic flute. The waitress had become the queen. The beast had found his melody, and in a city of noise, they had finally found their perfect harmony. And that is the dramatic conclusion to "If you can sing this opera aria, I'll marry you." From a spilled drink to a sonic weapon in a cargo hold, Camila and Alejandro proved that the best partnerships are forged in fire. What did you think of Camila's quick thinking with the microphone? And would you have forgiven Arthur? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more romance and drama. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next